Welcome to Andy Decodes. Sit back and enjoy as we dive deeper down into the rabbit hole and into the unknown.
Hello and welcome to today's show where I'm joined by the wonderful Steve Ward. Thank you for coming on again.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. It's been too long, actually. I think it's been well over 12 months now, isn't it?
Boy, you know what? If you're going to test my memory.
No, I think you was about 3 weeks away from moving down to Point Pleasant.
Okay. Then about a year and a half then. I think it's been about
a year. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. Time flies when you're as old as I am. Let's put it that way.
Tell me about it. Right. So how's it going in Point Pleasant?
Very good.
How are they treating you?
Oh, it's a great place to live. It really is. The people here are fantastic. I've got a great neighbor named Vallee, who if you need anything done, he knows everybody. He knows every contractor, every workman. He's been here for years. I had a great guys paint my house. It was kind of an ugly gray for a while. Pretty nice, pretty well finished off on the inside. But now I used to call it my ugly little house, and now it's absolutely beautiful. So things are going very well, and I couldn't be happier.
Excellent. So how's it going at the museum?
It's always fun. Now I'm only there on usually Saturdays between noon and 4, and the foot traffic is just amazing. You get the waves of people in, and my job is kind of a greeter, but also a lot of times I'll be able to engage people in conversation, and you always know if somebody is interested. I make myself available, but you kind of get the vibe if okay, we're good, we don't need any guidance, that's fine. But I get into some just wonderful conversations with people that are as fascinated by this stuff as you and I are. And what I'll do is the Mothman statue, the majestic Mothman statue, is just outside the building. So I will go back and forth from the Mothman Museum. And I will be I'm the guy that if you've got your families there and you want everybody in the picture, I'm your guy. You don't have to send out the kid that you don't like very much to take the picture of the family, right? Yeah. So, and it's a lot of fun because if you look up in the second story, Jeff Wansley, who is the founder and curator of the Mothman Museum, he's got a man in black up there in the window, a mannequin, right, sunglasses and the fedora. And at night, it's really cool because he leaves the light on behind it. But, I'll show people that we're being monitored by the men in black. And then also I will escort them around behind the statue because I don't know if you're familiar with the infamous shiny hiney. Yes. The Mothman has quite a posterior, which is about as famous as his front these days. And to get to see the reaction of people when they see this, it's priceless. And then once they see that, they'll take their picture by it or whatever. Sometimes they'll slap it. Sometimes they'll do things I can't mention on the air because I would be arrested. But then I'll tell them, see the man in black up there, that little black dot up there, that's our 24/7 moth cam. That means right now people all over the world on the internet just saw you slap Mothman's caboose. So and everybody gets a good laugh out of that.
Ah, right. That's pretty cool.
So
Do you know what?
that's a heads up.
I ended up buying the figure. So it's out of one of the Fallout games,
Oh
and
yes.
it's up on the I can't get it. I'll end up knocking everything over. And it's identical to the one that's outside the museum. It's only so big, and they're selling for like over $200, like 250, and I got it for, I think I paid 27 or £33 with postage.
Oh, great.
Well, what I did, I went on eBay, but I went on Christmas Eve. Looked at, there's only a few hours left. Thought, yes, that'll be like 10, 11 o'clock Christmas Day. No one's going to be on eBay Christmas Day. Got it. Well impressed.
I have one. Some friends of mine surprised me with a replica of the Mothman statue, actually purchased from Kelly Roach, who is the daughter of Bob Roach, who is the man that created the Mothman statue. So it's very nice.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an amazing. I've never seen it in real life, obviously, but the statue that I've got there, it's even where I've done the thumbnail for this, where it's got the little plaque at the bottom with the inscription on it.
Okay.
It's on there, but you can't, it's just like scribbles. You can't actually read anything on it.
Right.
But it's still definitely worth the money.
Oh, definitely.
100%. So do you get many people returning, like on a regular basis?
Oh yes, and actually, during we just had a Mothman festival. It's every third weekend in September, however that falls. And the last couple of years, I've been doing informal surveys. I've been the MC for the speakers, and I've been able to speak myself. And I also do the hayride on Saturday night, where we take people into the dreaded TNT area, risking their lives, and with a guaranteed flyover of the Mothman. And all the informal surveys I've done, certainly unscientific, but last year I was finding about 2/3 of the people were new, and it was 1/3 was the old timers. This year it seemed like it was a little more like 3/4 were new and 1/4 were the old timers. So it seems like, over the years with all the I mean, it started with the film 20 years ago.
Yeah.
People started to become more aware of the Mothman, but over the years there have been many, many documentaries. I can't, Denny Bellamy, who runs the tourist bureau there, has been involved with dozens and dozens of documentaries over the years. So and more people are learning about the Mothman. Call it history, call it folklore, doesn't matter. It's people are just fascinated by this story.
Yeah, definitely. Have there been many sightings or any sightings while you've been there?
Not that I've heard while I'm here. There have been several over the years after the 60s. Seth Breedlove, who runs Small Town Monsters and does these great documentaries. You'll find some people in, let's see, the Mothman of Point Pleasant and the Mothman Legacy. There are a few people in there that have seen something like the Mothman since then. But it does seem like his heyday was in the mid 60s, whatever it was. So people have weird experiences out in what they call the TNT area. And that, of course, is where they made munitions during World War II. And if you Google it, you'll find there was a great complex in the 40s where they made these explosives. They stored them in 100 of these concrete bunkers or igloos, which are still there. Just all kind of deserted and overgrown and so forth. But and that's was actually one of the first major sightings was right there by the Old North Power Plant, which isn't there anymore. But so that's it's an area you can actually. It's about 9 miles north of where I'm living right now in Point Pleasant.
Oh, so it's not too far then.
No, you can go out there and you can wander around some of the old bunkers. Jeff Wamsley and others do a tour, a couple tours on Saturday, where they takes you around town. You get some of the real history, some of the American history there, which I'm not as good at. I'm much better at the weird history than the American history.
That's better though, isn't it?
But you'll get both. You'll get the paranormal. You get the normal. And then they take you out to the area where you can actually walk into some of these old bunkers. And they also will show you where the old North Power Plant used to stand, where this all started.
Yeah. I was watching something a couple of months back about Point Pleasant, and there's going to like the Silver Bridge, and it's more like tours. And then there's at the TNT area, and there's going inside the bunkers. Because they're not as big as what I thought they was going to be. I thought they'd be like the size of a house or something, but they're not. They're just like a big round shed.
Yeah, really. Some of them are probably the size of. But I've got a pretty small house, so I think mine would be equivalent to one of the bunkers, one of the igloos.
Right.
But yeah, they're. You walk inside and your voice echoes. It's very hard to have a conversation in there. There are spiders in there the size of a Buick sometimes, and you walk all the way down. But it's a creepy area in the daytime, especially creepy at night. And we take people. We actually go out to the old farm museum, which is it's still in that general area, and actually across from the old North Power Plant used to be. And there are three of us that do the tours on Saturday night in the TNT area, and we're pulled by the three tractors, and two of the wagons, if you want to call it that, are sort of like proper hay rides. They have the bales of hay and so forth. They usually give me the old man cart with the nice comfortable seats, and we take people. You're accosted by the men in black, try to turn you away. But I tell people they're much more like the Keystone Cops and the Men in Black. And I spent a few days setting up, giant spider webs and creepy looking spiders with one eye and that sort of thing to give a little extra to the tour. But the big deal, the big cheese, so to speak, pardon me, is a guaranteed flyover of the Mothman. A couple of my buddies, there's a Mothman. When you walk into the museum, there's a Mothman hanging up in the ceiling. Well, they take him down. They take him out and hide behind what was the old acid plant. They run him down a wire, and they light up his eyes with battery power, and they blast a sound effect. I can't tell you where it comes from because they haven't paid any royalties for using this. We don't want them to end up in prison or with an ankle bracelet. So anyway, it's people always get a kick out of that. But there's a few other surprises. You got a couple guys dressed up in ghillie suits. They kind of hunker down in the shadows. And just when you think it's safe to leave the TNT area and go home, they will jump on the cart and just scare the living daylights out of you.
Wow. I do need to go. Definitely need to go.
And you need to. One thing people need to know is you got to get there early Saturday morning. Go to the information booth and stand in line to get your ticket for the TNT hayride. That's the only thing that costs a few bucks. Right. And they do sell out. So make sure to get your ticket. Yeah.
No, definitely. So before we come on air, we was talking about sorry, I didn't write the guy's name down. The guy who did the screenplay for Mothman Prophecies.
Richard Hatem, yes.
Yeah, that was it.
Yes, I got a chance to meet him. It was at one of Seth Breedlove's events. Like it was a monster something. I can't remember the name of it. But the small town monsters guy. It was I believe it was in Canton, Ohio, and it was just really well attended. And Richard had quite a lineup, and he told me that when he was writing the screenplay, they wanted him to not elevate the UFO aspect. They wanted the Mothman to be front and center. So he had to reduce the Mothman part for a while, but for a bit. It really was a fascinating guy. Now, one thing he didn't know, we also talked a little bit about Brent Rains' book. Brent Rains knew John Keel over the phone and through correspondence for many years. He wrote a great book called John Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries. Yeah. Well, in there, he was talking to a lady whose name I don't recall, but she was John Keel's literary agent. And she said that when John Keel got the screenplay from Richard Hatem, he was giddy. I mean, he was laughing. He was so happy because
Uh,
he'd gotten all kinds of. I guess over the years he'd gotten these horrible screenplays turning just Mothman into a monster, right?
yeah,
But he thought that Haddam uh, got some of the basic underlying themes of the book, even though they updated it to modern day and they've got the character that's sort of John Keel married and so forth. He was just really, really happy about that. Now, Richard Haddam didn't know that. I was able to tell him that you've got to
yeah,
get that book because John Keel was singing your praises about this screenplay you wrote. So he was pretty thrilled about that. And anyway, my first reaction to the film when I saw it was a little negative. I thought, gee, I wish they had gotten more of the essence of the book in there. But
yeah,
as time went on, I wanted more of the Men in Black phenomena, but I realized that after two very silly movies portraying the Men in Black in a comedic fashion,
yeah,
would have been very difficult to portray them as they were in the Mothman prophecies. People would have made that connection, and it would have been, funny. Unfortunately,
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
silly. But yeah, so I've really grown to appreciate the Mothman prophecies. Also, I remember hearing, boy, this goes back a few years. John Keel had not done a lot of interviews, but he came out to do some when the film came out about 20 years ago. He was actually on Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM. And
Yeah.
now Art Bell didn't know much about the Mothman. I mean, I've been living with the Mothman since I was in junior high in
Yeah.
November of 1966, that first sighting. And so he had John Keel on, and John Keel told him, he said that he liked the screenplay. He said the thing that they really nailed down was the paranoia that he felt at that time period. So
Right.
that was pretty interesting. That and the other thing was, you remember in the film there was the Dr. Leak that played by Alan Bates that Richard Gere goes to Chicago to see because he's written
Oh,
about this stuff,
yes,
right?
yes.
Well, of course, Leak is Keel spelled backwards. And John Keel loved Alan Bates' performance. He said he reminded him of him. It's this kind of old curmudgeon.
Wow. That's awesome. But what are you talking about that? Is there much talk about Indrid Cold?
Yeah, boy, that's you try to make sense of some of this stuff, and it does seem like there was something real that happened with Indrid Cold. Now, in
Yeah.
the film, Indrid Cold was kind of a composite character. There were other
Yeah.
supposed entities like a Mr. Apple, APOL,
Yes.
there were people that was part of the prophecies, part of the Mothman prophecies. A lot of these individuals firmly believed they were in contact with some other entity, whether it be Indrid Cold, Mr. Apple, or whatever, and they were getting predictions. Some of them would come true, and they would get this big build up, and then at the very end, they'd be sitting on the hilltop waiting for the aliens to come and save them, and they wouldn't
Yeah.
show up. So there was and John Keel called these people silent contactees because while they firmly believed that they were in a real contact with some of these entities, and it was probably more due to channeling, I think, rather than an actual physical connection.
Yeah.
But they had no desire to let people know about it. They weren't like George Adamski. They didn't publish a bunch of books and say, "Hey, I'm talking to this entity from wherever."
Yeah.
They went about doing, following their dictates, looking for things like a mysterious cross. Supposedly, they would get these these tasks to perform, and they just absolutely believed that this was a real contact.
Yeah. No, because it just seemed to be that there's a lot of stuff going on at the same time as
Yes.
as Mothman.
But back to Indrid Cold. Of course, well, the first thing that happened was Now Mary Hyre was another important character in the Mothman prophecy. She was the stringer for the Athens Messenger. She and
Yeah.
John Keel became good friends and colleagues. She was the one that wrote a column called "Where the Waters Mingle," referring to the Ohio and the Kanawha River.
Yes. Yeah.
And she would write about Mothman sightings, UFO sightings, and Men in Black sightings.
Yeah.
And so they kind of teamed up, and they I'm not sure where I was going with this. Oh, I know where. It was she was they were contacted by a gentleman unnamed that had this bizarre experience traveling down Route 77, and it was this elongated sort of cigar-shaped craft looking a little bit like the chimney on a kerosene lamp, and it landed. They had this two men in their truck had a bizarre conversation with this individual, which didn't make any sense. I mean, it was just one of these. If this person was an alien from wherever, it was, the conversation was very disappointing and very mundane. And so he wasn't going to tell anybody about it, and then he started drinking heavily. And he said, I just got to tell somebody. So he contacted Mary Hyre. She contacted John Keel, and he tells about this story. And they're going to go forward with it. But then he decided, it told John Keel, we're not going to, we don't want to publicize this. And Keel said, well, why not? And the guy said, well, this scientist fella told us we should just forget all about it. And he said, what scientist fella? And he said, well, I don't know, but he seemed to know what he was talking about. And he said, well, how did he find out? And he said, damned if I know. And so they had to leave it because, it was a blind item. There's nothing, nothing to verify it. I mean, not even a testimony from a named source. And then a couple days later, Woodrow Derenberger has almost the same kind of experience on Route 77. Only the difference is he goes to the police. And he says that this guy said his name was Indrid Cold. And so it seems like there was some kind of a real initial experience there. And then a few months later, there was another woman that he calls her, John Keel calls her Mrs. Brandt in the book, The Mothman Prophecies. She's across the river in Gallipolis, Ohio, living on a farm. They're having all kinds of bizarre stuff going on there. Cattle mutilations, classic haunting phenomena, apparitions walking through the house. Her son is seeing these large sort of boxcar-like craft flying over the farm.
Yeah.
And she asked John Keel if did he ever, meaning Woodrow Derenberger, did he ever see that man again? And John Keel said, well, yes, he claimed he did. Well, Mrs. Brandt claimed that, now she was a nurse, apparently. She was leaving work late one night, and empty parking lot. And she sees one of these elongated craft come down. Two men get out, and she can't move. She's paralyzed. And the kind of Indrid Cold types, although they don't identify who they are, in kind of these coveralls or whatever. Another pointless conversation. Keel wondered if in some cases, if some of these experiences were actually illusory, not hallucinations, but people would go into a kind of a trance state and there wasn't really something physical going on. But at any rate, so that she's they leave, and then she's okay. She goes home. The next day, she says she sees these guys in street clothes walking in downtown Gallipolis.
Yeah,
and one of them
I remember that.
At her. Remember that? And if that's a true story, that's going to be creepy as hell. So
because I was just going to say, with the two guys walking, well, the two supposed guys walking down the street, they kind of like stood out so much more than anybody else.
Right. And it's like, oh yeah, we talked to you the other night. Nice to see you. Yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks a lot, pal. But some of the initial experiences seemed like they were legitimate, but later on, she's no longer with us, but Woodrow Derenberger's stepdaughter she wrote a review of his book. He did a self-published book called Visitors from Lanulos. This is where that Indrid Cold was supposed to have hailed from.
Yeah.
And she said that later on, he embellished, while he had an initial experience, he embellished some of the details later on. He supposedly went off to Lanulos, only took an hour and a half to get there. And a lot of the ladies there on this planet they were a bit scantily clothed and real lookers too. I mean, some of the tales are just, you wonder where did the initial experience happen? And then where did it go off the rails? And if this was the only encounter with this, whatever it was, you could probably say Derenberger was full of it. But then you got this other unnamed man that actually came forward before Derenberger, and this other woman that had, and there are other people that have claimed to have met Indrid Cold. I'm a little bit skeptical of some of those.
Yeah.
But it's just another one of those things where you want things to make sense. You want it to be kind of a narrative, a beginning, a middle, and an end, some kind of a conclusion. But as you know, when you get immersed in this, I call it the Red Queen effect. Remember the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland? And the Red Queen's telling her, hey, if you're going to get anywhere, you're going to run faster and faster. And poor Alice is just, running as fast as she possibly can. And the trees are staying in the same place.
Yeah,
I think
just not moving.
For us, the trees just keep staying in the same place.
Yeah. But I remember you saying when he went to, I can't remember, Langelos, is it?
Gallipolis.
Yeah. So when he went there, he said it was less than a 2-hour ride. I remember the craft was I'm sure he said it was no bigger than a bus.
Yeah,
and he says, as it started to lift up, he could see the ground moving away. And the next thing he knows, he's out in this space without stars and planets and what have you.
But that's another thing. There's supposedly some people said that they saw him talking to somebody on the road on 77 there.
Yeah.
Some people claim to have seen some kind of a craft. So, it's just very difficult to pin down what is objectively true and what is nonsense. But also, and talking about the craft, it was very mundane on the inside. There were like bunk beds and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
A little bit like remember the Joe Symington and the guy that got the pancakes from the entities in Eagle River in 1961.
Yeah, I think I've still got that picture. This guy.
Oh, there he is. Yeah, he's the guy that that they asked him. They said, "Well, if they came back, would you go with them?" He said, "No, the food is terrible." He really says that in I think one of the YouTube videos. But that's another bizarre incident where April 61, Joe is he's a plumber by trade. He's a chicken farmer by day, and supposedly late one morning, this classic, a bowl-shaped craft, like two bowls put together, comes down. The door is open. He approaches it, and he sees these, I think, 3 guys inside, which are dressed in coveralls with kind of knit caps. There's a guy. There's one guy that hands him a chrome-colored bowl or whatever, because he kind of indicates he wants water. Now, why do these guys? I mean, these guys are interstellar. They don't have a hose or something where they can get water, or they didn't bring enough water with them. And then there's a guy behind him that's cooking something on a flameless grill. And this is not a very, you're going to waste all this space in a I don't know, a scout ship or whatever. It just doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
I talked to another researcher, Chad Lewis, who has heard that Joe Symington had other experiences after this. But he just shut up about it because of all the media publicity. So that's interesting. I'd love to know more about that. But these guys, Joe said, they looked like swarthy Italians. I mean, the judge that was interviewing him, he said, "What, Joe? Did these guys look like little green men?" He says, "No, Judge. They looked like swarthy Italians." So, did the swarthy Italians have a secret space program we didn't know about? I don't think
Wow.
so. But it's just another one of these. And the thing is that there's a lot more to this. But if this had happened a century or two earlier, people probably would have said that Joe had a visit from the fairies, even though they showed up in this odd-looking metallic chariot.
Yeah.
So there's just another situation where supposedly a close proximity with some kind of a craft just doesn't compute. It doesn't, where's all the computers and the flashing lights and all that stuff? No, they got a flameless grill that they trade some water for some pancakes or cookies or whatever they are.
Yeah.
And
didn't they want salt as well or something?
What's that?
Didn't they ask for? Can't speak. Didn't they ask for salt as well?
Oh no, actually, that's interesting. You bring that up because Joe reports this. The Project Blue Book is still in operation, and even Dr. J. Allen Hynek is still associated with that. They decide to investigate this. Now they think Joe just fell asleep and had a vivid dream, and that might explain why the pancakes tasted so bad if he made them in his sleep. But they actually spent taxpayers' money and took one of these pancakes and analyzed them. Now I have to segue here back to Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallee.
Yes.
Jacques Vallee made the interesting connections between some modern-day UFO experiences and various elements of folklore. Well, he quotes extensively from Evans Wentz. Evans Wentz was a theosophist that wrote the book The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, and he went around in the early 1900s and interviewed several people about their supposed encounters with the elementals. And these are like we talked to people about Bigfoot and UFOs. These weren't just stories that were handed down from a great uncle or something like that. And so he talked to an Irishman that told him, he said that told Evans Wentz that the fairies drink pure water, they eat fresh meat, and they never take salt. The interesting thing was that when they analyzed these pancakes, they were very terrestrial in origin, except there was no sodium involved. Now, that might not mean anything at all, but it is very interesting that these possibly modern-day fairies did not have any salt in their pancakes.
No, I just remember hearing or reading something about salt, but I couldn't quite remember what it was. Right. So it must have been that. But I was just going to say about Indrid as well. When Woodrow was met up with him, I think it was Woodrow or one of the other people. They said that from where the craft was, he'd had to walk across a field, and it's full of mud and everything, and his shoes should have been full of mud and dirt and what have you. But he said on closer inspection, he looked at his feet and there's like really shiny, polished shoes that he was wearing with no dirt on them whatsoever.
I don't remember that specific instance, but I do remember John Keel talking about there was a woman. Oh heck, where was she living? She was approached by men that would kind of fall under the umbrella of Men in Black.
She lived in the top farm or something.
Yes, and
that was it. Sorry about that.
And it kind of freaked her out a bit that here they've got these perfectly polished shoes, completely unmolested by the mud and the dirt, So, but there's a lot of kind of weird situations like that when people are talking about. Now, again, John Keel, when he used the term Men in Black, it was kind of a generic term. Didn't necessarily mean they were dressed in black suits with black fedoras and sunglasses. It was sort of that, because there were even Air Force people that were dressed in Air Force uniforms that would come and tell people not to talk about their UFO sighting or to confiscate photographs or whatever. And there was I don't remember the name of the official, but at one point, this goes back several years, they put out that There were people that were masquerading as Air Force officers that were not associated with the Air Force that were doing this. So the Air Force themselves did not know what the origin of this was.
Ah,
So, but
yes.
there are, and of course, in the if those who have read the Mothman prophecies, there are some real bizarre characters that showed up in Point Pleasant.
Yeah,
Harassing Mary Hyre, for example.
yeah,
Now, it could be some of these guys, as you know, in this area that we're in, this realm, it does attract some people that might be a little bit off. So it could be that occasionally some of these weirdos, if you will, are just weirdos. There's
well,
nothing
yeah,
supernatural or anything about them, but um, there are Jenny Randalls, the great British
yes,
researcher. She wrote a book. The title over here was "The Truth About the Men in Black." It might have been. I think it might be a slightly different title in the UK. She talked about a woman that, and again, I'm not going to remember her name or the area, but it was more contemporary. She had a UFO sighting. Sometime later, two men that seemed to be from the British government showed up, and her parents that she was living with didn't really couldn't really understand why they just let them in without any question. It was just kind of almost like not in a trance exactly, but they just didn't question it. So these two
yeah,
men came in, and the one starts firing questions at her, and she's very disturbed by it. I mean, and they're not particularly um, insightful questions or anything like that. Jenny Randall's got the idea that why don't we put her under regressive hypnosis and see if we can glean anything else from this? And when
yeah.
they did, they found out that the one was firing questions at her. The other one seemed to be firing questions to her telepathically, and they were
Oh,
alternating. Neither sets of questions, again, were particularly insightful or meaningful, but she was very disturbed by this situation and couldn't really express what was going on. And I thought, man, that's got to be one of the weirdest stories I've ever heard, you know. And
yeah,
that again falls under the umbrella of the Men in Black, if you will.
yeah. Because I remember reading that when the Men in Black first started to show up, you go to the local newspaper. Can't remember the name of it, and you say a woman's name was Mary, and they'd go
Yes.
in and say, "You need." Did just say stuff like, "You need to tell people to stop talking about it," and there was not with any authority. It was just these people need to stop talking about it, and then they'd go out the door. She'd go out and have a look, and there'd be nowhere to be seen.
Well, one of them said, "What would you say if somebody told you to stop publishing these UFO
Yes,
stories?" And she said, "I'd tell them to go to hell."
yeah,
And he was trying to get her to take her out to some of these areas where she and John Keel had seen some of these things. What they did was Keel and Hire, the TNT area became overrun with
yeah,
hundreds of people hoping to bag a Mothman. I mean, there were actually guys out there with shotguns and bow and arrows,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so John Keel and Mary Hyre went several miles south, still in West Virginia, over to Gallipolis Ferry, and this is an area that I imagine 50 years ago, uh, very desolate. I mean, there are houses out there, but a lot of country. There were the hills and the hollers and everything. They
yeah,
found this one particular hill where they were able to watch these strange lights go overhead all the time. Well, this guy wanted Mary Hyre to take him out there to show him, some of. And this guy was creepy as
yeah,
hell. He's stuttering. He's not dressed for the weather, and I don't know. I don't know what he was. I know was he an elemental? Was he an ultra terrestrial, or just a creep? Nobody you would
yeah,
ever want to go anywhere with at the corner drugstore or at one of the desolate howlers down there.
yeah,
So that was yeah. She encountered some of that, and again, it's well, but also John Keel noticed there were a lot of and these guys were probably just government FBI guys, classic dark suits, close cropped hair. I mean, they were obviously not from there, and you couldn't engage them in conversation. So it seemed like even though the Air Force and the government would pretend they weren't interested in what was going on that year in Point Pleasant, apparently they were, and I think there were a lot of government people there, kind of snooping around as well.
Yeah, because as well, Indrid, he was known as a grinning man, wasn't he? He kind of like had a fixed smile.
Right.
And a couple of people said his smile seemed too big for his face. It just didn't quite fit.
Well, there's also there's the broader whatever you want to call it, of the grinning man. This entity has shown up several times. John Keel covered investigated one. There were a couple of boys that saw this guy that was in was it New Jersey? They saw this guy behind a fence near the freeway at a place that would have been very hard for anybody to get in. He's very tall. He's kind of wearing one of these silver garments, and he just looks creepy as hell. The face, the features aren't right, are what you're talking about. Yeah. And but also there are these bedroom apparitions, if you will. Some of them are very much like the Men in Black, and they showed up for the Lilly family in the Mothman prophecies.
Yeah.
The Lillys lived on Camp Conley Road, which is kind of the southern border of the TNT area. They had all kinds of bizarre lights and everything going over. They said that when their TV started acting up, all they had to do was go outside and look, and these lights, these blobs of light, whether they were craft or whatever, would be flying overhead. And they would see and marry Linda Scarberry, one of the original witnesses that was chased down Route 62.
Yeah, them that was in the car.
They had kind of a Man in Black entity sort of manifest in their room. So and even the thing is, people sometimes ask me, well, what was the Mothman? Well, my stock answer is to kind of stall because I don't know. The Mothman, if you look at the reports, people described essentially the same thing: 6-7 foot tall, humanoid, red glowing eyes, kind of sunken down in the chest. It didn't look like it had a head per se. 10-foot wingspan. But then if you ask about the behavior, it didn't always flap its wings when it took off. It would take off like a helicopter.
Yeah.
A lot of people that saw this thing, according to John Keel, and a Swedish researcher that followed Keel in a couple of years later, named Franzen, found that many people that had this experience, including Linda Scarberry, had kind of an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena. They would have bizarre phone calls, beeping noises outside their home, and so forth. And then there are some people that saw it manifest like an apparition in their bedroom. So how do we pull all this together and to make sense of it? It's kind of a paradox. You had Keel talk to a little over 100 people that first year, and they reported, although some people just saw a very large bird of some kind. So one wonders if Keel was onto something when he talked about transmogrifications of energy. That perhaps the Mothman didn't always manifest in exactly the same way, yet perhaps it came from the same source somehow.
Yeah. I suppose it depends on the surroundings as well.
Well, it may depend somewhat on the viewer. And I've revisited Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who, of course, is a Sherlock Holmes guy. He was a paranormal investigator in his day. He wrote a book called The Coming of the Fairies. And in there, while he firmly believed that people were encountering these elementals when they were real, he said the appearance of the fairies is largely dependent on the person viewing them. Now, that sounds like John Keel 100 years later.
Yeah. It's very, very strange. There's something else I was going to say. No, it's gone. I don't know if it was to do with Indrid. No, I said about the Green Man. Oh, that was it. The telephones. So you said about the people were getting telephone calls, and they'd be picking it up, and there'd just be a load of static or interference, and then you get a lot with the beeping. And I think I read somewhere. Did somebody think it was some sort of Morse code? There's trying to get a message to him.
Well, I talked to a lady who on my show a while back, and
Yeah,
she was up late with a friend. And you've heard of how people hear a baby crying as kind of a connection with poltergeist phenomena.
yes,
There's no baby or infant there, but they hear it anyway. Well,
yeah.
one of them heard the baby crying. The other one did not hear that at all. They heard a beeping noise. And she thought, and I think she might be onto something, that it might be signal and noise. Like this electronic beeping is sending out this whatever, but one of them is hearing it as a baby crying. Now, I have
Ah,
no idea what the source would be or how that could possibly be, but I don't know. Uh, yeah, I don't know how to, and people would pick up the phone and they would hear sometimes this rapid fire conversation or something. It would sound like a foreign language they weren't familiar
yeah.
with or whatever. And, but it's just, it's inexplicable to say, you go down the rabbit hole to, you end up, it's that analogy isn't strong enough. It's like a rabbit hole with a million offshoots that you're
Yeah,
never going to get out.
yeah, definitely. Right, I've got a couple of questions. I was going to leave them for the second half, but if you want to do a couple now.
Oh, sure.
So, because two people have asked the same one on this. So this is from James Garden and No. And they're asking, does Steve think Mothman and Owlman are the same species? And then the other question was, could Mothman have any connections to Owlman of Cornwall sightings in 1976 in the Cornish folklore?
Um, I'm not sure that the Mothman was a species per se.
Yeah,
It's almost more like an elemental, to tell you the truth. Again, I always repeat myself when I say it's very difficult to condense some of John Keel's ideas into a few paragraphs. But
yeah,
he did not believe a lot of these things were uh, uh, flesh and blood entities. He thought perhaps they were paraphysical. They might be temporarily real, but they just sort of melt away after a while.
yeah,
I think uh, that there are a lot of winged creatures or apparitions that have been reported. Owlman, Mothman. There was the Wisconsin Man Bat maybe a decade ago. There
yeah,
was the Houston Batman that almost looked like a guy dressed up in some kind of a suit. How does
yeah.
that back in the 50s for crying out loud? Maybe he was out fighting crime and punishing evildoers. I don't know, but
You
but
never know.
it seems like you know I like the analogy of if you remember the film Forbidden Planet, the
Yes.
MacGuffin was where they discovered this advanced race, the Krell, and they all became extinct, but they had developed this device where thoughts where thoughts could become things, could become substance, so they could actually create matter. But what they didn't count on were monsters from the id, the dark side of consciousness. And they ended up creating monsters that wiped them all out. And of course, the good guys almost get wiped out at the end of Forbidden Planet. But fortunately, they save, oh God, what's her name? The blonde actress,
Don't
Honey
know.
West. Yeah, they save her at the last minute. But
Yeah,
and also there was a guy named Dr. Donald Almond who was quite a character. He went to exercise the Loch Ness monster, and he was no slouch because he went to also exercise the Bermuda Triangle. Well, he called this
oh,
the Phantom Menagerie, and I wonder if Keel was onto something where these are. He talked about the hypothesized the super spectrum, and that these things may actually be transmogrifications of energy, that we sort of co-create. Some of these things may come out of the human consciousness, partially. If that's the case, if he was onto something there, then maybe these things don't quite manifest in exactly the same way. Perhaps the owl man and the Mothman essentially come from the same source, so to speak, but manifest somewhat differently. So as far as a species, but Keel conceded that these things were at least temporarily physical. I mean, they would leave footprints. Some of them attack livestock and eat chickens and that sort of thing. Yeah. And then they sort of fade away. You're going to be reading the Eighth Tower. He talks about that to some degree, where he thinks that perhaps they just sort of they serve their purpose. The energy or whatever that creates them just sort of dissipates and they melt away. But that could explain. He talked a lot about window areas, trying to come to grips with why do these things sort of come out of nowhere, scare the hell out of people, and then they're gone.
Just go again.
We can't get them in a zoo. We can't get them in a cage or anything. Although it does seem to be hair samples and so forth that are left behind, so that it suggests that they are at very least temporarily physical. Yeah.
Well, that was my next question before we go for a break. Was what do you think? Not what was the purpose of Mothman, but what was the reasoning for the creature coming and doing what it did? And do you think it had anything to do with the collapse of the Silver Bridge?
I tend to think not. Now, there are people that think that the Mothman or whatever this was it had something to do with the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Others think it was a harbinger. But my problem has always been, look, if you're a harbinger, don't just chase cars and scare people. If you've got a message, somehow communicate it where the bridge is going to collapse. And that's something we can pursue after the break, because the people, the silent contactees that Keel was talking to, they started talking about this EM effect that was going to occur on December 15th, 1967. And all it was is misdirection. It's pretty interesting part of the Mothman prophecies.
Yeah. Right. Well, shall we go for a break now then?
Sounds good.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about the Silver Bridge and the goings on with that.
Sounds good, Andy.
Excellent. Right. We will see you guys in 3 minutes. Bye-bye for now.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And we are back. So
Great to be
we're
back.
gonna, yes, always good to be back. And so we're gonna, well, I'm not, you are. You're gonna be talking about the Silver Bridge and what went on and your thoughts of that.
Yes, I actually, before we get into that, I actually talked to a survivor of the Silver Bridge a few years ago named Bill Edmondson. He
Yeah.
was, this is December 15th, 1967. And to kind of paint the picture, this was 13 months to the day that the Scarberries and the Mallards were chased down Route 62 after seeing this Mothman, whatever it was, by the Old North Power Plant back in that November prior to. And it was, imagine it's December 15th. The bridge, it was built in 1928. It turns out that the 13th eye bar was faulty. And it was, pretty rickety. I mean, the bridge would sway and so forth. It was filled with rush hour traffic because just after 5 o'clock, and Christmas traffic. People like Mary Heyer and Mrs. Tomlinson were having dreams about Christmas packages floating in the water. So people were getting, some kind of vibe that something terrible was going to happen, but they never focused on the bridge. A man named Bill Edmondson, I met him in 2017 at the 50-year remembrance ceremony. He'd come up from North Carolina. He was 88 years old at the time, which means he was 38 when he was crossing the bridge in a semi. He was hauling material to be for tires in Detroit. So he was going from the West Virginia side to the Ohio side. And he told us that, if you've seen the film with Richard Gere in the Mothman Prophecies, he has all kinds of time to warn people that the bridge is going to collapse. Well, in reality, it took 30 to 40 seconds. There was just no warning that the thing started to sway back and forth. That the truck tilted so far that he had to hold on to the steering wheel to stay in place. Everything gave way. He hit the water. He was forced. Now, of course, the window's up because it's 20 degrees out. And he's forced through the passenger window, right arm first. And his right arm became useless at that time. And he actually got out from under the truck. He was his pants were actually dragging behind him, but didn't come off because of the 1960s pant cuffs. For you kids that remember 1960s pant cuffs, I do. And while the currents were pulling him up, some of the debris or something caught his pants and started to pull him back under. So he had to kick loose. He got to the surface. Now imagine his right arm is useless. The material he'd been hauling, there was a slit in the side of it that he was able to put his left arm through to stay buoyant. And a tugboat captain saw him and intercepted his flow downriver, and they pulled him up probably moments before he would have died of hypothermia. And of course, they rushed him to the hospital, put heat on him and so forth. So that was an amazing experience. I've never spoken to anybody like that one-on-one that had a survival story like that. But let's talk about what led up to that. Now, Keel was becoming, by his own admission, more and more paranoid. There's a chapter in the Mothman Prophecies entitled "Paranoiacs Are Made, Not Born," and he was getting all this information from these different silent contactees, and it started to coalesce. There was actually a date came up, December 15th, 1967, and there was going to be some kind of a EM effect. Now, I don't know what the EM effect was going to be, but nobody really did. It wasn't spelled out. But they said that when President Johnson lit the Christmas tree on the lighthouse lawn, there was going to be a big power failure for days, and all kinds of terrible things were going to happen. So by this time, Keel said he bought it hook, line, and sinker. He was holed up in his New York apartment. He had jugs of water, and he was ready. And he was there with a friend, I believe, and his friend was kind of looking at him sideways like, boy, you've really gone over the deep end here. So the Christmas tree is lit, and then nothing happens. But then a few moments later, a bulletin comes over the TV that the bridge between Point Pleasant and Ohio has collapsed. And so he was furious. It was like some intelligence, some force knew something was going to happen, but it was this misdirection, this nonsense about an EM effect. What's that? How's that going to save anybody's life? So it was, and he spent several frantic hours trying to get through to Mary Hire to find out, if any people that they knew had lost on the bridge. By the way, there's a kind of an aside here. You remember the beginning of the Mothman prophecies where he talks about this stranger who is knocking on doors because his car is off the right, and these two people come to the door, and they think that he's kind of like an apparition of the devil or whatever, and of course it's just John Keel.
It's just them.
He said a very tired John Keel catching a whale of a cold. Well, and then a couple of weeks later, these two people are supposed to have been two of the ones that died on the bridge. Well, for years, I thought that was a literary device. But Keel said no. He was asked in a interview, which is published in The Great Phonograph in the Sky. I don't remember I think it might have been Don Ecker. I'm not sure. But he said no. He said actually years later, he went in that area. He heard that same story about this couple that was met by this apparition of the devil. So it wasn't something that he made up for to catch, for the literary license. And this, of course, he wrote the Mothman prophecies maybe 7 or 8 years after the events. So there would have been plenty of time to gather some of these stories. So that was, I thought that was pretty interesting because I thought John was just having a little bit of a literary license there, but apparently not.
No.
So there was another. There was a University of Michigan professor. He was connected with Uri Geller and this other group that firmly believed that they were in contact. There's been a couple books written on it with entities from, I don't know if it was the Pleiades or whatever, but this one guy was the kind of the same pattern. These silent contactees would get, and that's why Keel was so paranoid, because many of these predictions came true, plane crashes and that sort of thing. So when this EM effect thing erupted, he really bought into it. But they, this one professor at the University of Michigan, he had bought into a lot of this stuff. And then there was the big one. He was the world was going to end, and everybody needed to gather on the hilltop because the Space Brothers were going to, rescue. And of course, Space Brothers didn't show, and his tenure didn't show either. So he was kind of kicked out of his job. So this kind of there's a certain pattern there that does show up. I caution people that if a lot of people are do channeling and they believe they're getting legitimate messages from elsewhere. Well, some may be legit. I don't know, but be very careful because some is just nonsense that will just lead you astray.
Yeah. Got a couple more questions for you, Steve.
Okay.
First one's from James Garden, and he's asking, is the Mothman a species of Nephilim?
Boy, that's above my pay grade. I don't know. I don't know. I guess I don't think so. I guess whatever the Mothman was some kind of a Keel for. He used the term ultra-terrestrial. Yes. Because he thought a lot of these things were natural conditions of the planet. They weren't from elsewhere, except perhaps extra-dimensional to some degree. So, and he also, it's interesting because he would use the term ultra-terrestrial and elemental interchangeably sometimes, which is very interesting. He also said that he borrowed the term ultra-terrestrial from Ivan Sanderson. And of course, Ivan Sanderson was the great British naturalist who was living in New Jersey, friend and colleague of John Keel. So I don't, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what I think about the Nephilim. You know, there are
Yeah.
people that are much more well versed in that, and yeah, I'm very yeah. I just I'm not. I guess I'm not well versed enough in the Nephilim to
Right.
make an intelligent answer.
No. All right. No, thank you. Thank you. Next one is from Sober Carper, and he's asking, are there any stories of Mothman type entities by natives from long ago, or did it start at Point Pleasant?
I think you'll find that winged. Well, you know, you have the Thunderbird that goes back
Yes.
at the Native Americans, and one of the classic Mothman witnesses I was able to speak to, Tom Urey, he didn't really see the Mothman per se. He saw a Thunderbird. This thing was about had a 10 to 12 foot wingspan. He was
Yeah.
in his convertible, and he was driving along, and it's funny because he knew Mary Hyre. And I think when I think Mary got something wrong about his report, kind of connecting it more with the Mothman per se. And it's
Yeah.
funny because here's several years ago, Tom Murray is telling me the story. Now again, he knew Mary, so he was joking when he said to her, "Mary, I ought to kill you." He did not want his sighting to be connected to this Mothman hysteria.
Right.
And she said, "Don't worry, Tom. This will all blow over in about 2 weeks." Well, here it was like 40 years later, and he's telling me this
It's still going
story
on.
that did not blow over. So again, you know, a lot of the Thunderbird sightings don't make sense to me either. I mean,
No.
where do these things migrate to or from? Where do they? How do they stay hidden? You know, John Keel talked about there's a chapter in the Mothman Prophecies where he talks about all kinds of winged creatures,
Yeah.
and some of them are glowing. He thought that I remember in one of the articles he wrote that he thought that perhaps when the entity or whatever is giving off a glow, it might be more of an indication that it's something temporal, something that's manifesting and not a flesh and blood creature. So the winged I don't know what you want to call it, the winged creature, the winged apparition, or whatever,
Yeah.
has always been with us in one form or another. And
Yeah.
so I think, but you know exactly. Now Tom Urey also originally he thought that some of the other witnesses saw what he did, but because of the freak out factor, they added the details of the red eyes and all that stuff.
Right.
So now there was a classic sighting, Marcella Bennett. She's the one that she went out with her brother to the TNT area when this story first broke. Her brother thought it was a joke. They were going to go out and tap on the windows of some friends of theirs that lived out there just to kind of scare them. Well,
Yeah.
the parents weren't home, so they were leaving, and that's when this thing rose up off the ground, and Marcella Bennett actually fell with her infant child on the ground. The child was okay, but
Oh,
I,
yes.
I've seen some long form interviews with her. So you know, but when the Mothman Prophecies film was being made, they were doing some publicity, and they went to Katanning, Pennsylvania, where Katanning was one of the places that substituted for Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And so on the way out, Tom told me, he said to Marcella, and I never met her, but he said, what, okay, let's tell each other our story. And so, and then he was sitting there when he was telling me this. He was at the Mothman Festival several years ago, and he's sitting next to Linda Scarberry, one of the original witnesses, and Faye
Yeah.
DeWitt, who's another original witness, but not in the book. And he had just met them. You know, you think everybody knows everybody in Point Pleasant, but they didn't. And so he became convinced that they had seen two different things. He saw the Thunderbird or whatever it was, and they saw something that was more humanoid.
Yeah.
But again, if Keel was onto something, it may be, you know, Keel got to the point where he wasn't that concerned about the description of the creature or if the UFO had portholes or whatever. He said he was trying to understand the cosmic mechanism behind these things. It may be that these things, not all of them are nuts and bolts or flesh and blood.
No.
Although some of them certainly do seem to be. I mean, there's as we talked earlier, John Keel felt it was more than one answer to some of these things.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was going to ask you as well. Did anyone witness the Mothman feeding or resting, anything like that?
No, I've
You
never
know
heard
of?
any report where it was.
No.
Although there are Bigfoot-like creatures that have apparently. Well, they never actually. I don't think they've ever actually seen them feeding, but
Yeah.
they, there are animals that are slaughtered in the wake of some of these sightings. So, I don't know that I don't know if the Mothman. I've never heard anything where the Mothman was actually feeding on something.
No, I've not either. But I just thought, with you living out there now, that you might have heard any stories or anyone come up to you and mention anything new.
Right. I did talk to a lady who saw this when she was 16, and
Yeah.
it was the let me think. It was the April 1967. She and her boyfriend were about 12 miles north of Point Pleasant. And first they saw this light, like a orb or something like that. And then it was a very, very strange situation. That they had missing time. She, at one point, when they took off, they saw a couple different lights. He did not see this Mothman creature, but she did. She was looking outside the window of the car, and she saw it near this light. She didn't know if it was flying with it, coming out of it, or whatever. But there wasn't anything. I've never heard anything about it actually. One wonders if it's really some kind of a temporal entity. Perhaps it derives its food from some kind of energy or something like that.
Yeah. No, I just thought, because if it is sort of interdimensional and it comes into our realm, would it be coming to feed, or like you just said, would it just be feeding off energy, whether it's negative or positive?
Perhaps John Keel thought that when he was referring to some of the Bigfoot-like creatures, that they, while they were here, they acted like real animals, and they stalked prey, they ate them, and then eventually dissipated or faded away. So if the Mothman did anything like that, he was very sneaky about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because no one. Suppose nobody was reported missing at that time either, was there? There's no reports of anyone going missing.
No, there was actually. They found it's pretty gruesome. There was some kind of a serial killer around at that time, and a bunch of bodies of young people ended up in a cave somewhere. Yeah, it's just it's something that Keel uncovered, and they at the time, I don't remember the exact dates, but these are like teenagers that would be hitchhiking or whatever. And who was it? Connie Carpenter, I think, was one of the original witnesses. Saw this thing by the Mason County Golf Course. There was an abduction attempt on her, whether it was connected or not. Some guy in a fright wig tried to grab her and pull her into the car. Whether there's any connection to that, I don't know. But the body count apparently had nothing to do with anything paranormal. Just some kind of a freak that was never caught.
Yeah. Oh. So they still don't know who it was.
No. Well, they never mentioned the name. Keel thought they knew who it was. Some guy that was disturbed, but some guy that had connections or whatever. Long dead, I think. But So just a gruesome side story that just kind of went along with everything else.
Right. No, thank you. I've just been writing some stuff down so I don't forget what to ask you. So you saying about when we was off air before, I said I've got the book The Eighth Tower by John Keel.
Right.
And you're saying there's a lot more stuff, there's a lot more accounts and detail in that wasn't in the original Mothman prophecies.
Right. Well, that's where he gets into heavy into the super spectrum, and hypothesized the superspectrum and trying to understand this mechanism behind the manifestations. So
Yeah.
there's it's more kind of the figuring out the nuts and bolts, the how that a lot of this occurred. There is there's a pretty interesting story that he came across. There was a guy who was I guess when Keel was investigating the Mothman, he came across a guy that was a reporter back in the early 20s, and he talked
Yeah.
about in that area how this some kind of like an airship crashed in the woods nearby, and it looked so odd because it looked kind of like a airplane, but there were no wings or anything. So
Oh.
eventually they tracked this thing down. There are some kind of short guys in there that they thought might be Asian, and then some other guys that looked more Caucasian. And they
Yeah.
looked very surprised when the sheriff and this little posse came on them, and they said, "Well, we're everything's okay. We just have to make some repairs, and we'll give a full report to the sheriff later on." Of course, they never did. And the guy telling the story, he said he picked up this. He called it a thingamajig. Something, some of the debris was laying on the ground, and he thought, "Wouldn't this?" He said he didn't know why he did it, but he picked it up as kind of a souvenir. So later that night, like about 2 or 3 in the morning, somebody's banging on his door, and he opens the door, and it's one of these guys, a little bit short, looked kind of like he might be Asian or whatever, but he was
Yeah.
kind of dressed with a wide brim hat, like more like a World War I uniform. And he said in a gruff voice, "I think you have something that belongs to us." And this guy is in kind of a stupor because it's 2 in the morning. He says,
Yeah.
"Oh." So he goes to his coat, he pulls the thingamajig out and hands it to the guy. The guy slams the door and walks off. Sort of shades of a early Men in Black style report. So I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just another fascinating story that it ends up in the Eighth Tower. Another mystery.
Yeah. Cool. No, I definitely need to read that. So I said I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna be lazy. I'm gonna listen to it over the weekend. I said it's like
That's the best way.
yeah. I think you take it in more if you're listening rather than reading it.
Yep.
Because I always have to reread stuff to make sure I've read it right, and
Right.
then it needs to sink in. So read it about 5 times.
Well, I don't know how many times I've read the Mothman prophecies, but once the Audible version came out, that's all I listen to now.
Yeah. I think I've got about 4 copies of it. I've got it on Google Play. I've got an Audible. I've got 2, the actual book I was telling you before, the 2 books are one pre and post the movie. I'm sure I've got it on another, I think, playbooks as well or something.
Well, I recommend, there's a lot of anthologies that are published by John Keel there, where they've collected his articles from various decades. Some of the articles that I actually have in the old UFO magazines. I was the guy that was buying these things fresh off the stands. The only thing I would, the guy that edits some of these will put in editorial comments that I think are nuts. So I would just be careful when you read the editorial comments and even some of the introductions. Make your own decisions. I think Keel doesn't really need to be annotated, and I think some of the stuff is just way off the mark. But that's just me.
Yeah. Did you ever get a chance to speak to Keel?
No,
No.
I wish I had. He was here in 2003 when they unveiled the Mothman statue.
Yeah.
And there was we have a TV show over here called CBS Sunday Morning, and there was a guy named Bill Geist that would do a kind of a human interest piece at the end. Well, he covered the Mothman Festival that year, and he's talking to John Keel. He's got his white suit on, and it was really it was very, very humorous, but very well done. I do have a story about John Keel. Back in the old days. And of course, you guys all remember the 60s, right? Well,
no.
Yeah, right. Anyway, we had our own group, the Aerial Phenomena Investigations and Research Center. There were 4 of us. 2 of the guys published a pretty decent amateur UFO magazine. And
Yeah.
Kevin, our sort of director, he went off in 1967 to there was a big UFO convention run by James Mosley of Saucer News at the Commodore Hotel, the Congress of Scientific Ufologists. And so he met all kinds of people there, Gray Barker, John Keel. And then the next year, he and a buddy of his got a hold of John Keel's address. And he said, we actually had the balls to knock on his door of his apartment cold. And he let him in. He was very gracious. They talked for about an hour, hour and a half. They were all sitting cross-legged on the floor. He was in his PJs, surrounded by hundreds of newspaper clippings. This would have been back early on. He was commissioned to write an article on UFOs by Playboy magazine. So this is probably some of that research there. But then later on, he wrote another great book called UFOs Operation Trojan Horse, where he tries to pull all these things together. Fascinating book. So those newspaper clippings would have been, that's where he discovered the Wednesday phenomena, where UFO sightings seem to peak on Wednesdays for some bizarre reason. But anyway,
and it between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. or something?
10 p.m. and 2 a.m. rather. But anyway, I would have loved to have been there. So I had to live vicariously through friends of mine. I did meet Gray Barker briefly at the 1976 MUFON Symposium. And I kind of cornered him and asked him a whole bunch of questions because I figured, when am I going to be able to talk to Gray Barker again? So that was fun.
Yeah, excellent. Just think, so going back to the Men in Black, sorry, and I'll keep jumping back and forth because this really intrigues me. So you had the ones that were going, just turning up saying, what would you do if somebody asked you to not talk about it anymore? Then you'd have the other ones very similar saying, we want you to stop talking about it. And then, like you said before, the two that turned up and then they were seen the next day walking up the street.
Right.
But weren't they in like ill-fitting clothing, like the clothes were too big, or they was not of that era?
Well, yeah, they sometimes their dress was out of date. Keel said they would be in older cars, but the inside was like brand new, just all kinds of things. I just reread an article in an old UFO Report magazine written by Rufus Drake about several cases of where some of these characters looked almost like cadavers, looked very unhealthy, and would have trouble speaking and so forth. Brad Steiger said that the only Men in Black type that he ever encountered was what he called one of the cadaver types. So, it just, and the other thing is, if you really want to get go on off the rails, if you go back to, there's a book called Demonolatry by Nicholas Remy, I think. He was hundreds of years old. He was a witch finder, I think. He was not a nice man. He would get confessions out of the ladies that were practicing some kind of witchcraft. And while some of the ladies, I think, were doing some pretty creepy things, others were just probably doing things like reading cards and crystals and so forth. But yet they're, but when these witches supposedly consorted with the devil, a lot of these devilish figures, if you will, were like modern day Men in Black. I mean, they were dressed in black. They're wearing hats. Instead of a black Cadillac, they might be riding a horse. Sometimes their voices, they didn't have vocal cords, supposedly. So the voice would just seem to emanate from wherever. There have been several cases where people have supposedly conversed with entities that landed in a craft where their voice was sort of disembodied. Maybe it came out of a speaker, maybe it just came out of thin air. It's very, very strange with some of the possible parallels between the belief in these demonic manifestations and some of the modern day Men in Black. So, just very, very strange, and
Yeah,
not an
definitely.
experience I don't think I would really relish to have.
No, no. We'll leave that to somebody who wants it. So, as well, I know West Virginia is like one of the biggest hotspots in the world for anything and everything that out of the ordinary. Are there any recent activities that you can talk about that anyone's told you? I don't just mean Mothman and UFOs. I mean anything like different types of cryptids, Bigfoot, Dogman, fairies.
Um, not so much. I do get stories in the Mothman Museum sometimes about
Yeah,
people will tell me about their UFO experience or whatever, but nothing too earth shattering that comes to mind.
no,
Um, but the thing is, as you know, when you're over at somebody's house and you get talking about these subjects, everybody's got a story. Everybody has,
yeah,
whether it's they were working on their house and doing some construction, then all of a sudden they get all this bizarre activity. Um, you mentioned the grinning man. There's another one,
yes.
the man in the checkered shirt, and this uh, there supposedly there were a couple men in checkered shirts that were climbing all over the Silver Bridge a couple days before it collapsed. I don't know if that there's any connection or not, but I remember John Keel writing about this apparition showing
Yeah,
up, and I thought, well, that's interesting. Well, many years ago, I was in Tennessee with my ex-wife,
yeah,
and we were at her uncle's, and there was a lady friend over. We just started talking about this stuff like people often do, and she talked about this apparition of this man that showed up at the foot of her bed. And she stopped and she said, now she knows nothing about this literature. She said, it was really weird. He was wearing a checkered shirt. And I thought,
oh,
what? Holy cow.
wow,
So you do get these stories from people, and
yeah,
my main interest is the patterns, the connections that seem to show up, and it can be with different types of phenomena, like
yeah,
cryptids and UFOs, and different time periods and different parts of the globe.
yeah,
There's I give the example a lot of vehicle stoppages, people that have had close proximity with some kind of a strange craft or light, their car stalls, right?
yeah,
Well, it's happened with cryptids as well. There's been some cases where the close proximity of a Bigfoot seems to have stalled a car. I mean, you can't
yeah,
prove it. There was a case of a phantom army in England one time that manifested, and this taxi cab stalled temporarily. So there
oh,
are those interesting patterns that keep
yeah,
showing up that suggest that maybe Keel was onto something. Maybe these things have a common source, and
yeah,
they just manifest in different ways for some reason.
yeah. But going back to when you're saying about Wednesdays were like the most prime time for UFOs between 10 and 2, he
Right,
actually did studies around the world. It wasn't just like in one place. He did
right.
it for the UK, South America, Africa, the US, and he did like from he did it like Monday to Sunday for each place and all different times. And the one that was standing out, like you said, was Wednesdays
Right.
between 10 and 2.
And you would think that weekends would be the prime time.
Yeah,
People are out there getting a little tanked up, and
yeah,
might take a glance
yeah,
at the sky and see that craft from Alpha Centauri. But apparently, and it gets even weirder than that. There's a researcher named Ahmad Jamaluddin who wrote a
okay,
book called something about 60 years of suppressed evidence, and it's about humanoid sightings.
yeah,
And it's a big, thick book, which is out of print now, and people are asking like $1,000 for it. But he took the Albert Rosales that
yes,
has this incredible database of humanoid sightings, and he's published maybe 15 books
yeah,
of different years, going all the way from 1 AD to the present. And so Jamaluddin took that database and he crunched the numbers, and he found that, I'm trying to remember, I think maybe November is a peak month for UFO encounters with humanoids, and that I think that was another peak month for encounters with the fairies, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
But also, he said that the best time to have an encounter with humanoids is something. It's between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And like 12 noon is one of the worst times. If you're looking for the aliens at 12 noon, you might as well just have a lunch break. You know,
all right.
but also he found that this held true in every single time zone,
Right.
suggesting that the point of manifestation or entry is fixed as the world turns. I mean,
So
if that's
traveling as the Earth's spinning.
right, it's just
Must
right.
be.
It's that, and the other thing he talks about humanoid migrations. He said that there's about 8 to 10 year period where, and it's very difficult. I mean, these things don't always. You can't really predict exactly where.
No.
But he said that you'll have a humanoid outbreak, if you will, in South America, and then another year or two it'll move up to North America, US or Canada. Then it'll move over to the UK or the continent, and then Asia or Malaysia, and then come back again in an 8 to 10 year cycle. It seems to be now. Other people need to kind of crunch these numbers and see if they can verify this, but very, very interesting. The one thing he says that if these things are true, it suggests, more than suggests, that people are not hallucinating. People don't hallucinate, in a fixed time zone as the world turns. So something is going on. Now he thinks, he seems to think that these things are the jinn. And there are people that believe that there are some parallels with the jinn. It started, it started in the West. I mean, the Islamic countries have seen this connection for a while, but I think it was Gordon Creighton from the Flying Saucer Review that wrote an article in the early 80s suggesting this connection. And then Anne Druffel, who wrote a book called How to Defend Against Alien Abduction, which sounds like a parody, but it's not. She found that there were people that, through sometimes things like righteous indignation or other techniques, could actually break the contact. Well, she devotes a chapter to the jinn there. And then sometime later, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who we lost a couple of years ago, she wrote a book on that possible connection with the jinn. So, I don't know. It's just another manifestation of the ultra-terrestrials or transmogrifications of energy, or perhaps those are the guys we need to look at. I don't know. But it's very interesting that these all these countries have these traditions of the others amongst us, as Albert Gonzalez would say, and it's some of them seem like we're really dealing with physical flesh and blood entities. Others are more like, something out of the Phantom Menagerie, something more ethereal, something more elusive.
Yeah, I'll need to question Albert on that because he's coming on next Wednesday. So,
who is
Albert Rosales?
Oh, excellent! Yeah,
he's on the show next week. I was speaking to him the other day. He'd just come back from California, and he got a cold or something. And his voice was like proper gruff and like that. So.
Well, he's
but I'll ask him about that.
Well, he's a fascinating guy. He really is.
Yeah, I think he was writing. Last time I spoke to him, he was writing a book.
Okay,
I'm sure he was. I think he's always writing books.
He's about due for. He left off at 2015, I think. So he's probably due for the next segment, which I'm
the next lot. Yeah,
waiting for breathlessly.
Yeah. Have you got any plans in writing a book?
I am allegedly I am writing a book. I've got part of it written. I tell people by the end of the decade it'll probably be done. But it's going to be on that kind of thing, the patterns, connections, parallels. I don't have the thing to pull it together yet. It's more it's just some random observations right now. But I don't. I just don't have the the light bulb hasn't really gone off to make it
Yeah, to
something
connect it all together.
right.
Yeah. Oh, we'll look forward to that coming out anyway. We have got another question for you, and
Okay.
this is from Sober Carper again, and he's asking: have there been any more mass sightings since the bridge collapse?
There are claims that they talk about the Chicago Mothman, and supposedly there's been a lot of sightings over the past several years. I'm a little skeptical. I know that I have 3 different sources that have told me, a couple of them from MUFON, that some of the original sightings in that general area were coming from the same IP address. So some of them are questionable. There's a great researcher named Alison Jornlin that did a lot of footwork where she would track down a lot of these alleged sightings and found problems with some of them. If somebody's making up a story and they don't get the all the details right about the area it was seen, so she found a lot of problems with that. There may well be something to that, but I'm just very skeptical, and I actually kind of ignore that whole Chicago Mothman thing, which is unfortunate because there may be some substance to some of them, but I don't think there have been any other mass sightings. I mean, you have that Linda Godfrey covered the Wisconsin man bat 10 or 15 years ago. A man and his son were driving along in Wisconsin, and this big, ugly bat-like creature hit the windshield and flew off, and they got very ill afterwards. There seems to be no end to the variety of cryptids. I mean, we've even had reports of bat squatch. Now, explain to me.
I've heard of that.
What kind of a wing spread do you need to lift up something that big? But supposedly some people have seen them, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to put a picture up. Everyone in the chat will hate me for it because I do it quite a lot. So this was sent to me from a guy in America, but it's from a place in the UK. Have you heard of Cannock Chase?
Oh, okay.
It's a big hotspot.
Right.
We went a few weeks back. We're going again in a couple of weeks, doing a second trip to see if we're going to a different part and seeing if we can get anything when we get there. And rather than going walking about doing miles of trekking and that, we're just going to find a spot and not set up camp because you're not allowed to camp, but set up base and see if the phenomena comes to us. So this a lot of people call it like the Michael Jackson hamster because it looks like it's been walking. So this is the zoomed in image.
Take a look here. Now, is this supposed to be a real photograph?
Apparently so. So what it was there's a farm. I'll put the other pictures up in a moment, but there was the story behind it is there was a farmer and he was having some activity going off. So we set up a trail cam to see if he could pick anything up. So I'll do the 3 pictures that I got, I'll do them in order. So this is the first one. So you can see the trail will be like, I don't know if it's grain or straw or something on it. And then what looks like on the floor is just like gravel and dirt.
Right.
So that's the first one. Then you've got this one, which is a lot more in focus.
Right.
And then the last one, where to me it looks like it's walking away.
Right.
Oh, it's starting to move.
Do you know the name of the farmer?
No, I didn't get any of the information. And the person that I asked they've not been well, so I'm still waiting for him to send me details through. We are trying to find out who or where it was.
Okay, because I do know a farmer named Lee Hample that lives near Bray Road and Elkhorn, Wisconsin, sort of the central hub of these dogman sightings, and he's had all kinds of bizarre activity on his property. He has thousands of photographs, some
Yeah.
look like some kind of technology flying around in the sky. And he has he's kept a lot of these photographs close to his vest. He's been in one of the Small Town Monsters documentaries called The Bray Road Beast.
Yes.
And I've spoken a couple times at the Beast of Bray Road conference, and he would have people over to his barn and show some of these photographs. The guys from Eric Mintel Investigates, the Bucks County guys.
Yes.
Bucks
Yeah.
County,
Yeah. Yeah.
Pennsylvania. Are you familiar with their?
Yeah, Eric was on last week, week before, so I'm friends with Eric as well.
Well, that's okay. Well, good. That's the farm that he's been on.
Okay.
And his there's they did a couple of years ago. They did a video where they're out there and they're hearing this howling coming from different sides of the farm. And I'm no expert on animal howls, but it's creepy as hell. They saw eye shine 6 feet off the ground. They saw a UFO, a strange light moving in the sky. At first, they thought was a satellite, but then it just zipped across the sky. A mist started forming, as they do out there. It could have been natural atmospheric conditions, but boy, when you see the photographs that Lee Hampel has captured, in coupling with some of the investigations out there, there's something. It's so bizarre because it suggests there's some kind of a technology there, but these creatures, they act like animals. They eat roadkill. They eat bait. Their tracks are 5 toes, which doesn't make any sense. The tracks show up in the middle of nowhere in the snow and split into 2 sets of tracks. He has had several roadkill deer that he has pulled onto his property and aimed a camera at them. At some time in the night, a mist will show up, and then the carcass is gone. No drag marks and no tracks. And this has happened maybe a dozen times. The hair, he's gotten hair samples, apparently, from these creatures. There's no medulla in them, suggesting, I don't know what, almost like they're a construct that comes out of no. I've wondered that if this technology, whatever it is, has created these beasts. I mean, we have the Slender Man belief that these things came out of nowhere, except thought. You've got the Tulpa, creatures from the id, so-called. I just wonder if they, and this is going way out there, I just wonder if they have created these beasts to kind of scare people away. And it may not be working very well because there are people like us that flock there to try to see them. So maybe they need to go back to the drawing board if that's the case. But it's so bizarre. You have this technology of things flying around in the sky and the creatures on the ground. Of course, we have a lot of that. Stan Gordon, who wrote Silent Invasion about the Bigfoot UFO wave in 73, 74, Southwest Pennsylvania. They were seeing these strange lights along with these bizarre Bigfoot creatures that would sometimes disappear on a flash of light when they were shot. You can go all the way back to 1897 with the majestic airships that were seen flying in the sky. There was one seen over Ohio between several sightings between mid-April and mid-May. And on the ground, they're seeing these large black cats in Chillicothe and other places. And they were even seeing something they were calling a wild man that sounds suspiciously like a Bigfoot in the Adams County where the Serpent Mound is. So you get a lot of these situations where you have something in the sky that's ahead of our technology and then some kind of a cryptid on the ground. And there seems to be some kind of a pattern there.
Yeah. So why do you think, though, that there's a lot of activity, like I'd say in America, and not so much, you don't hear that much like in Europe or Indonesia?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know why certain areas, because we have several hotspots here. Marley Woods in Missouri, what's it, Bridgewater Triangle, of course, the Skinwalker Ranch and so forth.
Of course.
But perhaps in some of these areas, people are not just as apt to report them. And maybe it's a false, indication that maybe there is more going on in other parts of Europe and so forth, but people are maybe a little more reserved and not so not so apt to report it.
Yeah. Cheers for that. Sorry, I'm just gonna. So I'm just going to show you this picture. This is from the one before, and then the drawing is from the 1970s. So the black and white drawing is a replica of what someone's seen, which was known as the Slitting Mill I think it's Slitting Mill Goblin. That's an artist's impression of what the person told him it was. And the other one, the one in colour, was only from a few years ago. So to me, they do look quite similar.
Right. I have whenever I see an image, I'm just naturally skeptical because of the ability of, computers to create false images. So, it's a shame that if somebody actually captures something that's legitimate and could give us some real evidence, and, you have to kind of say, well, I don't know if this is real or not. There are photographic experts that can, I think they can examine some of these and determine whether or not they're legitimate.
Yeah. Well, I have sent that photo to a couple of people, and they've both, two of them come back to me, and there's like, we can't say if it's fake or if it's real. We just don't know. It's a real photograph. It doesn't look like there's any CGI involved or Photoshop, but that's all we can say. We don't know. It could have been someone in the costume. I don't think it was, but that's just my opinion.
No, it doesn't look like a costume. If it's fake, it's got to be constructed somehow, some kind of CGI. Yeah.
So, but that was the one that the Slitty Mill one, because that's close to where we're going to be going at the end of the month. So hopefully.
Well, make sure you get your affairs in order, just in case we don't see you again.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've got all my things that I need to take that are all legal, by the way. So I don't have to worry about that.
That's good.
So there's about 4 or 5 of us going, so it's not too bad. Safety in numbers.
Oh yes, just don't be the guy in the back. Because if you've read the missing 411 books, you don't want to be the guy in the back.
No, definitely not. So do you do you ever go out doing any investigations or research?
Not too much. I go out sometimes. I'm more of a research guy,
Yeah.
So if anything happens to me, it's going to be in my house. I'll disappear from the house somehow, not out in the wilderness. It's been a while. The last time I was out in the TNT area was when I was setting up creepy crawlies for the Mothman festival. So that was I didn't have any real creepy crawlies try and get me out there, which was good. Cool.
And I don't know if I asked you last time you came on, but have you had many encounters?
No, I have my one standard bizarre encounter a few years back. I went out to the TNT area alone. This is before I moved down here at night. I just wanted to see if I had the intestinal fortitude to do it alone. It's no big deal. The people live out here. They camp out there. They
okay.
So forth. So, but it's so I went out and I looked like a real paranormal investigator. I had my flashlight. I had my digital recorder duct taped to the flashlight, and I had a everything. And so I went out to the one Igloo Road, number 7. And I went into number 2 Igloo. And when I was driving back, I experienced a couple flashes of light, like a strobe. And I thought, that's weird. Now, I did everything wrong. I should have tried to figure out what did this happen in the road, so I could come back the next day and see if I could figure it out. Anyway, long story short, I got back to my motel, which was across the river at the time. Yeah. And I opened the door to my room. The TV set turned on by itself, and then started flipping steadily through stations. And this stuff doesn't happen to me. This happens to other people.
Yeah.
And I just unplugged the TV and I went to bed. So yeah, I was listening to Joshua Cutchin, who's written a lot of great books, great researcher, and he said he was in a situation not exactly like that, but a lot of times people that are experiencing something odd don't register, you don't do the right thing, they don't write it down what happened.
No.
I talked to a lady and her husband that had missing time. They were on their front porch. They all of a sudden they're not standing next to each other. They look up and they see this large black triangle flying overhead, and they didn't register at that time. They just turned around and went back to bed. So now that the next year, actually to the month, I was in the room next to that one with a couple friends of mine. We're crammed in there trying to save some money, right?
Yeah.
These are the guys that fly the Mothman, by the way. And
Right.
so the TV set turned on by itself that night. It was one of these older style TVs. And so we tried to get scientific that time. We were trying to use the remote through walls and see if, would come on.
Yeah.
The next day, Tim and I came in for some reason. The TV set turned on by itself again and flipped through a couple stations and then stopped. And that was it for that. And then a few years later at a Mothman festival, the room next to that one, so this is all in the one corner of this motel.
Yeah.
It was a bigger room. They had a one of those smart TVs, a bigger TV.
Yeah.
And there were two couples in there that we knew because it's a bigger room. So they were having trouble with the volume on their TV set. It would keep getting lower and lower, so they'd crank it up, and then it'd start blasting. So they would do it all over again. Then all of a sudden, a beverage can flew off the nightstand next to where they were by itself. So something weird going on. And I told people, I said, if I brought something back with me from the TNT area, fortunately, it's still there flipping channels, and it never came home with me. So that's it. I mean, I've told the story many times, but that's my entire paranormal experience.
Yeah. Wow. It's still good though. Well, depending on who you are, but it is a good story though, is what I mean.
Well, it's the one I tell over and over again. So if I was making up stories, I'd give you a new story every time.
Yeah. No, it's been great. Oh, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And you'll have to let us know when the book's out.
Yes, well, like I say, by the end of the decade, I think we'll hit pay dirt. So keep your eyes open.
Yeah, definitely.
And I do the high strangeness factor on the Paranormal UK radio network. I've been on with Andy Mercer.
Yes.
You know Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah, good man, and he makes the show a lot smarter when he's on. And I was been on kind of hiatus this last September because I drove to the Exeter UFO Festival at the beginning of the month, drove to the Van Meter Visitor Festival at the end of the month, and did a lot of work on, didn't have to drive anywhere to get to the Mothman Festival, but there was still a lot of work. So I was exhausted by the end of September.
Yeah, not surprised. At least you can have a bit of a rest now. For now, are you doing?
In fact, to recover, for a couple of days, I was kicking back watching British murder mysteries. So there you go.
Oh, best one to watch is Midsummer Murders.
Yes. In fact, I just stopped watching one to come on the show, and I think I remember who did it, but that's okay. They're still good.
Are you watching the ones with? Oh, can't remember. He played Bergerac. Can't remember his name. John Nettles. Yeah, they're the better ones.
Well, I skip all over. I like the other Barnaby as well, but
no, the John Nettles ones, the original ones, they're the better ones.
They really are good.
Yeah. But if you want a bit of a comedy one, you've got Alan Davies is in it with Paul. Caroline Quinton. I can't think what it's called. I was watching it the other night and the missus turned that off. It's rubbish. I can't think what it's called.
Well, I love the classics. Ever watch Dad's Army?
I used to. I
Okay.
can't watch it anymore. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. It's never aired over here, so I have a
Yeah.
region-free DVD player where
Oh, right. Okay.
and otherwise I can't play a lot of those British comedies and murder mysteries. So I
Yeah.
recommend get yourself a region-free, and you'll
Yeah.
be very entertained.
Definitely. Jonathan Creek, it's called.
Oh yes, excellent.
That's really good. But yeah, I wasn't allowed to watch it. I think we ended up watching Married at First Sight or something like that.
No.
Awful TV. But yeah. No, but they're the best two, I reckon,
Yeah.
out of all of them.
Definitely.
Yeah. Also, thank you again for coming on. Really do appreciate it. And just before I go, I'm going to be doing another stream after this. It's only going to be about 10-15 minutes, just with all the updates of what's coming up over the next few months. Next week, there are 3 streams. On Tuesday at 8 o'clock, we've got a paranormal team called To Investigates. On Wednesday, we've got Albert Rosales. And on Friday, should know this now, we've got Michael Kopf, Cal Ridley, and Michelle Gray coming on. So that's that for next week. And after this month, I'm not going to be doing the Tuesdays anymore, but I'll tell you all about that later. So, yeah, thank you, Steve. Really do appreciate it. I'm definitely going to try and get to come over next year because I can't. It's killing me not going. It really is. I keep seeing all your posts on Facebook. It's like, I just want to be there. Just even if just for a day, that'd do. I'd be happy with that.
Plenty of warning when you're coming, so we can roll out the red carpet.
Yeah, I'll bring the Mothman with me if you want.
Oh, well, bring the Owl Man. You know,
Yeah.
like these guys to meet up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get an Owl Man. I'll make one if I have to.
Very good.
Right. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you everyone who listens on podcast. Have a great weekend. I am coming back on in about 10-15 minutes. It's only going to be a quick one, and that's it. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, everyone in the chat. And if I don't see you in a while, I'll see you on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. So take care, everyone, and goodbye.